our relationship with Israel has become increasingly problematic, and it always was problematic. So I'll again ask the questions, Piers. I'm asking you because we're having a conversation. Yeah. Name something positive that our Zionist AIPAC foreign policy has brought to America.
So recently, Candace Owens was on Piers Morgan's podcast talking about why Trump was wrong to drop bombs on Iran on behalf of Netanyahu and Israel, the influence of the Israel lobby on the United States, and why that relationship doesn't benefit Americans in any way. Now, she spit fire on another segment in this podcast that I already reacted to, so let's take a look at this one too. Let's watch and let's react. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
First and foremost, the idea that you have to formally declare war on like a piece of paper in order for war to happen is a little bit ridiculous. I mean, he dropped bombs. He dropped bombs in Iran. So yes, we are a part of this war, whether we like it or not. Iran is now speaking and saying that they're going to shut down the Hormuz Strait. There's going to be impact on oil.
Why would they do that? Why would they do that when the main victim of doing that would be Iran? I mean, 50% of China, of the traffic of stuff through there is for China, which is one of their allies.
Don't care, not my business. The point that I'm making here is that to make the assumption that you can just drop bombs on a country and then say, well, you know what, we didn't formally declare war is patently ridiculous. I think that is just patently ridiculous.
What about when he killed General Soleimani, one of Iran's top military commanders?
Sure, an assassination, a strike, and that, of course, came with some risk. It's a little bit different to be flying out B-6 bombers in the middle of the night and dropping bombs at the behest of Bibi Netanyahu, which brings me to the second point. The reason that America wants a regime change in Iran is because Bibi Netanyahu is demanding it. And that answers the question as to why there is this split in the MAGA movement. What we are seeing right now is the infiltration of Israel first people, the neocons, people who have always wanted never-ending wars, and the people who have recognized that following Israel's foreign policy initiatives has led to America being on the decline. And so that's where I stand. I am with the MAGA people who grew up, I call us like, Generation 9/11, who were told that America was going to be rendered safer, cleaner. All we had to do was agree to go to, well, ironically, war with Iraq because of weapons of mass destruction. It's all of the same rhetoric dating back to 9/11.
Yeah, this is so true. And to be clear, she wasn't making the argument that Trump shouldn't have sought a declaration of war. She said that war exists regardless of that, and that, the U.S. got embroiled in this war for the sake of Israel that wasn't ours to wage. And that is true. Massey's bill would have curtailed that. Thankfully, there's a ceasefire now, and hopefully that holds, but I don't suspect that will hold. Both parties already violated that. Israel violated that right away. And if anything, Iran is now going to fast-track nuclear weapons, because I sure would. She is arguing that we can't just get away with allowing presidents to do the things that we berated, this side berated Obama for doing, for Biden for doing. Biden did targeted strikes against Iran just last year, and the Republicans dragged him over the coals over that, saying he needed a war declaration. Well, a lot of people, and it wasn't just the neocons, were supporting Trump's strike, and whatever he wanted to do, they moved goalposts from, we're going to negotiate with Iran, to they can't have nuclear weapons, to Israel's doing this on their own, to we actually bombed Iran, but it was great, and then regime changes on the table. And I believe it was. The only thing that stopped that was Iranian restraint. They tipped Trump off to the reprisal missiles they fired, and that's why we don't have regime change. He was flirting with it. He was floating it out there as a possibility on Truth Social when this was happening. Thankfully, he took that off ramp. Not the worst situation happened, but she's totally right here.
All of the same tactics of trying to smear people who are against this war as supporting jihadists. It is not my business to affect a regime change in Iran. It's simply not our business. It doesn't impact us one way or the other. And we also are completely done with the idea that these decades-long idea that we're doing it to spread democracy because we believe in international liberalism. There was no imminent threat to the United States when Trump made this decision to do what Bibi wanted. And I want to be clear here. This was not Trump's decision. It was Bibi Netanyahu's decision. And that is the reason that he did it. And we're very aware that Israel is dictating our foreign policy, and we would now like that to stop.
Okay, so two things. First of all, Trump is culpable for following this pursuit of action to some regard. So I'm a little bit harder on Trump than Candace would be, but it was on behest of Israel and the Israel lobby. We know they have their claws into Trump. Trump's even boasted about that relationship, saying he gave the Adelsons whatever they wanted, that Netanyahu's such a great guy. He just tweeted that recently, or put that out on Truth Social, this long expose trying to get the Knesset to drop corruption and fraud charges against him, despite the fact he deserves to go down for that. And he deserves to go down for being a war criminal, fomenting a genocide in Gaza as well. But she is right about, we need to stop this facade that it's all about democracy and it's fighting in the Middle East to preserve our freedoms, because they hate our freedoms. What came to Libya and Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan under regime change operations? Hate to say, it wasn't the ideal liberal democracies that they talk about. It was different types of fundamentalist regimes, slave trading in Libya. You got former Al-Qaeda members at the head of Syria now, Jalani, or al-Shara, he's sometimes called, shaking hands with Trump. Trump saying he had a strong past. What does that mean, having a strong past? Yeah, he fought against U.S. soldiers in Iraq. That's treasonous. So, yeah, she's totally right again right here. And, man, is she a firebrand right now.
But you wouldn't disagree, presumably, that Iran has been the main sponsor of terrorism in the Middle East through the Houthis, through Hezbollah, through Hamas. I mean, that's widely accepted and recognized. They've done
things widely accepted. Now, that's just kind of...
Really? You don't think they have?
Has been a terrorist state. Okay, Israel right now is imparting a genocide and a Holocaust on the Gazan people. So I'm really over this idea like somehow Israel has the moral high ground and we have to get behind them.
I didn't say
because
that.
We got to go after the bad guys.
I wasn't saying that.
But we have.
Oh, hang on. Look, we can come to Gaza, where I think we'll.
Okay, so she's right about this too, and I noticed whenever neocons and people that talk about Iran being the #1 sponsor of terrorism in the world, they never back that up with any metrics or any quantifiable, proof that that's the case. And how do you measure terrorism? Because I think Ronald Reagan once said that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter anyways. And you know what? It sure seems like Israel is a pretty big purveyor of terrorism in the Middle East. And you know what else? It sure seems like the United States is a pretty big purveyor of terrorism across the world, probably the biggest purveyor of it. So yeah, this can't be qualified or backed up by any proof. And Candace Owens is right to talk about Israel as a sponsor of terrorism, who also funds Hamas. They never talk about this, but it was Netanyahu and Israel and Likud who wanted to fund Hamas to destabilize the PLO and the Palestinian Authority, the Palestinians in general, such that it would prevent the creation of a Palestinian state. Netanyahu's on the record for this. And this came up in Israeli news, mainstream news. Haaretz and the Times of Israel reported the extent to which that Netanyahu has funded Hamas, including on one occasion 2 weeks before October 7th. So, yeah, I'm with Candace on this one, too.
Reach agreement about what Israel's government's been doing there in the last few months. Without
but it's
any
relevant.
question.
If you're going to call Iranians terrorists, if they right now had an open concentration camp where they were mass killing their own people, we would all be saying this is ridiculous. So it's rich to me that people are concerned about Iran having nukes. But I'm concerned about Israel, who won't even admit that they have nukes, having nukes, while at the same time, they are executing a genocide and a Holocaust in Gaza that the world is watching. So who's the bigger terrorist is the question today. I would say as an American that if we're going to get behind a regime change, it should be in Israel first. So that would be my position. I think the position of a lot of people who are waking up to the fact that Zionism has brought us nothing but grief in America. Can you name one positive thing that Zionists have contributed to America? That us fighting these perpetual wars on behalf of Zionism has contributed to America?
But can you also recognize that Israel...
Notice he does not answer that and goes to a question instead. No one can answer that. And to be fair to Pierce, he's not a fan of what's happening in Gaza at all. He's kind of making a devil's advocate case here, and I'm not here to defend Pierce either. I disagree with him on a whole host of things, including some things related to Israel and this Iran war and Ukraine, etc. But yeah, she's totally right. This is insane to think that, hey, the United States and the U.S. taxpayer should support a war on behalf of a power with a secret nuclear weapon program against another power on the suspicion that it has a secret nuclear weapon program that it doesn't have, according to Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI, 7 weeks ago. And according to all of the IAEA data on this, and according to all the congressional record talking about how they complied with the JCPOA from 2015 to 2018 when Trump tore it up. So yeah, I'm with Candace. I'm not on regime change. I don't believe in sending U.S. military to enact regime change in Israel. That would open up a whole new Pandora's box of entangling alliances. I just want to get the United States out of the Middle East, pull back all resources, get all soldiers, all bases back, tear down those bases, bring the soldiers home, and get away from these stupid regime change operations and military strikes and occupations. We don't need it. That really is Israel first in almost every regard. And yeah, American neocons and establishment liberals that back this nonsense are totally complicit too.
Well, placed where it is as a tiny thumbprint in the middle of a region where you have massive countries full of a lot of people that want to wish them harm. And in the case of the terror groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, actually want to get rid of Israel and all Israelis altogether. Can you accept that if you have a huge nation like Iran with 90 million people, and they are facilitating the terror groups to that purpose, that Iran has to defend itself? Now, I would not disagree with you about what has been going on in Gaza in the last few months. I've been very vocal in my criticism of that. Nor do I disagree, by the way, that it wouldn't help Israel if they did have regime change and Netanyahu wasn't prime minister anymore. So on those points, I think we have agreement.
Yeah, agreement on regime change if it's not a military operation. Obviously, Netanyahu's a war criminal that deserves to go down, and I really hope he will. And I'd hope that Trump stops defending him and touting his case on Truth Social, too.
But I come back to the fact that the reason Trump has done this, I think, is that he has for a long time said Iran cannot have a nuclear bomb. I think he's absolutely right to believe that would be a pretty terrifying escalation.
But they don't have one, and there wasn't evidence for it. There's only evidence for it even, floated out there one day before the U.S. strike by Tulsi Gabbard, which contradicted her report 7 weeks ago. It does not exist. They didn't have nuclear weapons. No one claimed that. Even Mossad didn't claim that. And Netanyahu, in his first interview after Israel's strike against Iran, said they might be, 12 months, 13 months away. So they didn't have one. They can enrich whatever percentage uranium they want because Trump tore up the JCPOA. They are a member of the NPT. You just can't build a nuclear weapon, and they didn't do that, so they enriched to 60% to have a deterrent without having a nuclear weapon. But guess who does have a nuclear weapon? Again, Israel. And they get a special exemption for some reason. They're not subject to IAEA restrictions because they won't admit it. And they stole that technology from the U.S. Kennedy tried to stop it. It was the Domina Project. There was discourse and communications between him and David Ben-Gurion. And, they still got it anyways. And by the way, Kennedy got assassinated in circumstances that are still debated to this day shortly thereafter.
Of the power of a country that's been so wedded to terrorism in the region. And I think he took the action for that reason. So I don't really agree that he's only doing it because Bibi Netanyahu wants him to go along and do it. I think he's doing it because he believes it's in America's strategic interest that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. Enough about 9 to 5. What about the Earth? Shouldn't be.
Skip ahead.
Nobody does
It was
that.
in the American people. He could have allowed the people's representatives to vote on whether or not.
But nobody does that.
It was in the American people.
Hang on, no president in living memory has, with almost zero exceptions, has bothered to get congressional pre-approval for military strikes. We know that. You know that.
So it's justified then, right? Because no other president did that, then let's just keep going along with this madness where the president of whatever political stripe is in power gets to act, more powerful than, like a 17th century English king, as powerful as, a 17th century Chinese emperor. No, that's not what we want in the American political system.
Yeah, we know that, and that's not
Obama
okay.
was the
By the
big-
way, that's not
Obama
okay. That's
did
not an
more
argument.
strikes than anybody, right?
Yes,
I mean, Obama
yes,
never
of course.
asked anybody
I'm
for
not
any
an Obama
permission.
supporter. Yeah, that doesn't make it okay. By the way, like that argument, just so we're
Exactly.
clear, saying, well, we've been doing it wrong forever, so we should just keep doing it wrong is not an argument that's right.
I don't disagree with you about that.
Okay, so I disagree with Obama doing it. I disagree with Trump doing
fair
it.
enough.
And especially when what we're talking about is what could rise to be a nuclear war, right? We should have done things the right way. And he had indicated that he was going to wait 2 weeks, and then he didn't wait 2 weeks because Bibi Netanyahu, at least according to the Israeli press, if you believe it, said, we're not waiting 2 weeks. We want this done immediately. But I will say you are correct. He's not just doing this because Bibi Netanyahu demands it. He's also doing it because Miriam Adelson demands it. He took $100 million from Miriam Adelson. It was very clear what she wanted. She was clear that she wanted to annex the West Bank. So there was an imperialist plan that was put into place. And unfortunately, when you do a deal with the devil, you're going to have to eventually deliver the pound of flesh. And that is what Trump is doing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have to agree with her, and it's also the neocons, the never-Trumpers that suddenly appeared on Trump's side, all in on his Iran policy and the Iran bombing, and especially when regime change was floated out there in that Trump Truth Social post, what he said, well, if Iran doesn't make itself great again, why not have a regime change? Like, he was floating that out there to see how his base would react to it, to see if there was, potential for that to be on the table. I think that it was. I think that if Iran didn't practice restraint, he would do it. And she's right. Lots of people were complicit. So neocons, the military-industrial complex, Miriam Adelson for sure, Netanyahu, and what he's wanted there forever, which is regime change. And yeah, if you don't declare war, that's a problem regardless of who does it. It hasn't been done in the United States since World War II. Now, in Iraq, the Iraq War, they had an AUMF, an authorization of military force that Congress passed that wasn't a war declaration, but that delegated immense amounts of congressional power over war to the president, and that is also unconstitutional. But that's still better than what happened, recently, where the president just decides to arbitrarily bomb whatever country he wants. That's not what the founders envisioned. Not at all. And Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich and Thomas Massie and Justin Amash and Rand Paul were always right for calling that out.
And more evidence of that is the fact when he tweeted that there could be a Trump hotel in Gaza. I mean, that was truly, in my opinion, the most inhumane thing he's ever tweeted.
Well, I think it was pretty clear I think what he was doing there was pretty clear. He's saying he wants a better life for Palestinian people, a life where they have beaches,
well, when you
and they
pair
have
that
hotels,
with Jared
and they have golf
Kushner
courses.
and Jared Kushner's private equity firm and their ties to what's happening in Israel, and Jared Kushner being on camera shortly after October 7th saying, wow, that property could be worth a lot of money, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable. It makes Americans a little bit uncomfortable now.
Yeah, it also made Americans uncomfortable when he was talking about, just taking over Gaza for the United States and establishing it as, a real estate venture. There was a famous press conference between Trump and Netanyahu talking about that too, and that raised quite a few eyebrows. So it's not just him talking about the Trump hotel aspect there.
Now, you've asked me to come onto your show to explain to you how the now very fractured MAGA movement is feeling, and I'm telling you that, right?
No, it's really.
So
I find, honestly,
I do also.
I find it really. I find the
question.
split in the conservative movement in America genuinely fascinating because it
and
really
it's
is a
only going
genuine
one direction.
schism now.
Yeah, there's a genuine schism, and it's only going one direction. And by the way, we shouldn't even call this a schism because trying to dress this up and delude us into believing that the MAGA movement is what has Meghan McCain cheering, John Bolton cheering, has Mark Levin cheering. The literal faces of the Never Trump movement are saying this is real MAGA. Yeah, we're not going to be that delusional.
But you're on the same side as Alex.
Yeah, all right, so this is a great point, and I'm not beholden to Trump. I've never been beholden to the MAGA movement, but she makes a really good point here because all the people she just listed, the Meghan McCains, the John Boltons, the Mark Levins, were all to a T. All those people, those neocons, were 2016 Never Trumpers that stood up there and said, I'm not supporting Trump no matter what, even if he wins the nomination, even if he wins the presidency. But now for war, suddenly this is the issue that can move them away from that position. And some of them were moved away a little bit before that. The Ben Shapiro's did give Trump some support on certain things because of how pro-Israel he was. But on this, they really came out and said, if you oppose this, you're not MAGA then. And what they were trying to do was they were trying to co-opt the movement in a neocon direction and push away the actual non-interventionists that were part of this coalition too. And it's so transparent to see that. And Candace recognizes that, and that's really good to see. And again, not a Trump supporter, but she's absolutely right about that.
Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. How do you feel about that?
You're asking about the MAGA movement. The MAGA movement has always been a movement that explicitly did not want to keep involving our sons and daughters in the Middle East. So we have not changed that position. If AOC was always anti-war, then she should have thrown on a red hat in 2020 and in 2015 and joined the MAGA movement. That would have been fantastic.
But are you saying America should never use any military action? You're on the same side as Greta Thunberg when it comes to the Palestinians being murdered every day. Yes, I am. I'm aligned. Okay, but are you saying that America should never use any military action then?
No, I'm not saying America can never use any military action. In fact, what I said earlier was I could get behind a regime change in Israel because I think it would fix a lot of issues that are happening and that has been happening to America over time.
Well, here's where I disagree. I don't believe in using the military for that cause, but the only cause in which I would use the military is to prevent invasions of my own community. And that's a war I would be willing to fight in. And I wouldn't support any war that I'm not personally being willing to fight in, because then it's just empire building. It's these schemes for the military-industrial complex and the Israeli lobby overseas in the Middle East. That's what we've seen from all these regime change operations and occupations. I think Julian Assange was totally right when he said, in the context of Afghanistan, they don't want a successful war. They want an endless war. And that's so true. It's a lucrative venture for the military-industrial complex to continue receiving taxpayer funds to fund this madness. So I'm not with Candace about using military force against Israel whatsoever, but I also don't want military force used across the globe. I'm not a pacifist either. I only believe in defensive war. That's why I think you can get behind the American War for Independence. You can get behind, to some extent, the War of 1812 under just war theory, where you're defending yourself. Some people won't defend it as much in the War of 1812. That's a tangent I won't go off on. But I think that the American Revolution, or the War of Independence in America, was justified under those tenets. It's not justified under Iraq or Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, etc. So.
But why wouldn't you want it in Iran? I mean, I'm reading an Amnesty International report from 2024.
Because Iran is not negatively impacting. I'm answering your question because Iran's regime is not negatively impacting America on a day-to-day basis.
When the leader of Iran says death to America, why doesn't that concern you?
That's a chant. And by the way, I want to be very clear. Why are they chanting death to America? Why are they chanting that? That's kind of a random thing. Like, I don't wake up one day and go like,
dead?
But why are they specifically chanting as opposed to saying, I don't know, death to China or death to Russia? What is it specifically about
they say
America?
Death to America.
Could it be our Middle East policy? Could it be that? Could it be the ventures of empire building that the U.S. has partaken of there? Sometimes on the behalf of Israel and the military-industrial complex and the neocons, the grand, project for the new American century, what that called for, the militarization of the Middle East. The establishment of a greater Israel, the push for that cause to expand the West Bank settlements, to just wipe out Gaza, have a genocide there that the U.S. is bankrolling. Could it be that? No, it's these chants. It's, this chant propaganda is so stupid because especially after the U.S. bombed Iran, when they were backed into the corner and it seemed like regime change was potentially on the table, what did they do? Remarkable restraint. And I think they got good advice maybe from Russia or other countries in how to deal with this, because if they didn't do that, if they took out, dozens, maybe hundreds of U.S. soldiers in that region, there were 40,000 plus in the Arabian region. They could have done that and they didn't. And guess what? They defied all of the propaganda that you heard from the neocons about how they would act. They'd try to wipe Israel off the map or kill as many U.S. soldiers as possible, and they didn't. It's all propaganda, and she's right.
Death to Israel, death to the United Kingdom, actually.
Oh, okay.
Death to pretty much anyone that wants to stand up to them.
Could have had something to do with our actions in the Middle East, is why I'm saying that we need a change in foreign policy. It maybe has something to do with just like killing 1 million Iraqi civilians, because Bibi Netanyahu got on a congressional stage and said there are weapons of mass destruction, and we took that to the bank, and there actually were no weapons of mass destruction.
And he also said, if you replace Saddam, there will be incredible positive reverberations throughout the Middle East. You can still see this video today. And he was the regional expert. And they still rely on him to dictate U.S. foreign policy as it relates to the Middle East. They rely on him and allow him to undermine U.S. foreign policy goals, which was to negotiate with Iran for the sake of this wayward, insane project that he thought might allow for regime change, as he's always wanted there. So Candace is 100% right here.
So we just killed 1 million. It could have something, I could be crazy. It could have something to do with our actions in the Middle East. The fact that we have 2,000 troops stationed in Syria right now under the guise of saying that we're fighting ISIS, while at the same time we know that Bibi Netanyahu funded the al-Qaeda adjacent front because he wanted to overthrow Syria. And they, again, expand their borders, immediately take on territory and sell us absolute nonsense. We're talking about funding Hamas. Bibi Netanyahu funded Hamas. There is footage of Bibi Netanyahu saying this stuff on camera. So it's just so ridiculous to me to pretend that they're in some predicament, that they may be eradicated soon, which is why they have to keep funding all of these terrorist groups and then pretend that they're victims of terror.
This is true, too. A lot of people don't know it in the U.S., but this is widely reported in the Israeli press that Netanyahu supported Hamas over the years. It was reported in Haaretz, the Times of Israel, and even 2 weeks before October 7th, the head of Mossad went down to Qatar to do the exchange. So yeah, they wanted that to happen such that there couldn't be a new Palestinian state. A second state solution that always would have prevented by destabilizing the Palestinian Authority and Palestinians in general by making this terrorist group stand as kind of the banner wavers of that cause. And that, I hate to say that that's worked, but Netanyahu has been as supportive of Hamas, if not more, than Iran,
when in fact they are the people that are imparting it worldwide. You know, I just think that, like I said, Generation 9/11 has grown up, and I think that our eyes are very clear here, and we recognize that our relationship with Israel has become increasingly problematic, and it always was problematic. So I'll again ask the questions, Piers. I'm asking you because we're having a conversation. Yeah. Name something positive that our Zionist AIPAC foreign policy has brought to America.
And you can drop the mic right there, because she asked that question several times to Pierce, and he just could not come up with an answer. They never can come up with the answer. You know, sometimes they'll say, well, it's showing that you're pro-democracy and that we're supporting each other's democracies in relative different areas of the world. But how's that a benefit to the U.S.? And is it a democracy when the Gazans don't vote in Israeli elections? Is it democracy when the Gazans don't get the most basic rights of Israelis? They can't travel at will. It's almost impossible to leave. They can't fish a few miles off the coast. They don't have the same due process rights. The conviction rates among them for crimes are absurdly high in comparison, regardless of what they actually do. The starvation campaign, you have IDF soldiers attacking and killing people waiting for aid. This is the fruits of what we get for supporting democracy in the Middle East when they call it that. You know it's a ruse. They spend a lot of time calling Ukraine a democracy too, when, Zelensky's stopped elections and expanded conscription and done away with political dissent, shut down rival political parties, shut down Eastern Orthodox churches, all that nonsense. So Candace is totally right here, and man, did she handle this interview well. I said that in another video too, but I love to see her control the dialogue here in a way that Piers Morgan was thrown off by. Piers Morgan is not used to having someone this assertive on his program because he can run guests over. He has that propensity to do it on guests that are a little bit less assertive than Candace, but I'm so glad that she was here. Great interview. She's 100% right. Only big thing that we would disagree with is using military force to enact regime change in Israel. Now, do I want Netanyahu to go and face justice? Yeah, I do. I don't think he'll ever face justice for this genocide, although he should. And he definitely should face justice for these fraud charges and these corruption charges, which he probably would have gone down for if not for October 7th. Those were mounting leading up to that point. So then it behooves the question, why did Mossad know about this attack that was happening on October 7th for a year in advance? And that's not a conspiracy theory. Again, that was reported on in the New York Times and the Times of Israel, that they knew about that an attack like this was coming for a year. So, yeah, Candace is totally right on most of the merits of what she said here. Great interview, but I do want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments below. Do you think that she was right about this? Has the Israel first mentality steered the U.S. into terrible foreign policy? I certainly think so, but I want to hear from you on that. Please like my video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Pierce. He has a great Jerry Springer-like program in terms of politics, too, that I appreciate. And please consider supporting me as a YouTube member or a Patreon patron. You can get advanced videos and such, and it would really support me. I'd appreciate it. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Thank you guys. Have a good one. I'll catch you in the next one.